Everyone knows that hordes are totally broken in EU4, letting you conquer half of the world in 100 years. Or of course doing a world conquest before 1500. And since Domination DLC, the Mandate of Heaven is also a pretty strong thing to have, giving you, for example, co-creation cost, monarch admin skill, admin efficiency, development cost, a colonist, and many more crazy bonuses from the celestial reforms that you can of course take every single one of them at the same time. The only problem is, if you become the Emperor of China as a horde nation, you will be forced into becoming a monarchy with the locked Celestial Empire reform that you cannot get rid of. At least not with normal ways. I'm the student, and today I'm going to show you how you can become the Horde Emperor of China. Okay, so first of all, you have to understand that you don't need to conquer as much as I did in this campaign. I just did it because, of course, after all, I'm going to end this video by forming the Mongol Empire, but we'll get to that in a second. Because that's not what this video is all about. What this video is all about is how you can become the Emperor of China while still being a horde. And I already said it, if you become the Emperor of China with the CB of the current Emperor of China, of course, then you will get the same tier 1 government reform that he has, which is Celestial Empire. And this is a locked government type, which means you can't switch to a republic or a theocracy with the government reforms or something. You can't change your tier 1 government reform or something. So you're basically locked into that monarchy reform. Now, interesting is that, for example, as Japan, you have a mission which is below the mission New Buddha, where you basically have to get the Christian incident and then decide to not go Christian, and then you can decide to become either a shogunate, which you need to wait to the Age of Absolutism for, or you can become a divine empire, and that gives you another tier 1 reform of a divine emperorship. In this case, he has an Eastern plutocracy, but it's a special reform that you get from a mission. And that means that if you are a Japan Emperor of China and then click that mission, you will change out of that government reform of the Celestial Empire, because you get another tier 1 reform scripted through that mission. Now, missions are a special thing where that works quite well, actually. But, for example, events that you trigger that give you a new government reform, they are often locked behind that the option is even available, is locked behind that you are not the Celestial Empire. Another way to get rid of that tier 1 celestial reform is if you form a nation that has a unique tier 1 reform up on the formation. For example, Persia. If you form Persia as the celestial empire, then you get the Persian tier 1 government type instead. Now, that doesn't exactly solve the problem, because then you are still a monarchy. You are no longer the Celestial Empire monarchy, but you are still a different monarchy. Okay? And as most people know, it is very difficult, very, very, very difficult to switch from a monarchy into a horde government type. What you sometimes could do is you could play as a native tribe and reform your religion or something, but that only works for a few religions in game at this point. For example, Totemist or something doesn't have this mechanic even right now. So That is basically a problem, and of course you will lose your native reforms if you become a monarchy, so you can't become a steppe nomad with the native reform on tier 6, okay? So that is really, really problematic. Interestingly enough, there is one nation that can give you the opportunity to become a horde, which is, funnily enough, pretty close to China, because it is, of course, Tibet. Now the problem is that if to form Tibet, you are not allowed to be an endgame tag, of course, which means that most of the things to get rid of the Celestial Empire reforms, such as forming Japan for the mission, forming Persia for the tier 1 reform, forming Russia for the tier 1 reform, and so on, Ruthenia, same thing. All of those nations to form are endgame tags, and that is for most nations the case that have unique tier 1 reforms that you switch into. They are endgame tags, and therefore you would be Japan, but you won't be able to become a horde nation if you are Japan, because you can't form Tibet and you can't get the Tibetan events. Maybe you could form Switzerland or something, because it gives you, or it locks you into a republic, but that is like super far away, of course, so it is not really an option to go through that. Now, of course, you can form Tibet as the Celestial Empire, right? So there's nothing that holds you back from that, and then trigger the mission. But what most people don't know is that this mission actually does not give you that reform directly. What it does is it triggers an event which is called Meeting with the Khans, and that event has several options to choose from. And there are two options that make you a horde nation, or steppe nomad tier 1 reform, but the problem is that those two options are disabled, so you won't see them, you can't click them, if you are the Emperor of China. And that actually goes so far that you can't get those options even if you are the Mandate of Heaven without the Celestial Reform, okay? So even if you would become Emperor of China and then form Switzerland to get rid of the Celestial Reform and then form Tibet to trigger the event, that wouldn't work, okay? Which means that this right here is literally the only way to become a horde Emperor of China. And what I'm talking about is, of course, forming Tibet before becoming the Emperor of China. And there is another problem, because I'm of course a horde right now. You know, you could start as a non-horde, that it would be easier, but I can't form Tibet if I am a nomad nation. Which means that the first thing I need to do is I need to switch out of my current horde status to get to form Tibet. And in this case, it doesn't even matter which one I go for, but I'll just stick with the casual monarchy reform. There we go. I'm not even going to actually enact anything, because it doesn't really matter. But of course, now I need to switch to primary culture Tibetan. And by the way, I'm already Vajrayana, Buddhist religion, because there is actually an event, or rather a mission with an event, in the Mongol mission tree that allows you to become that without switching through rebels or something. Otherwise, you would of course have to switch to the religion via rebels. And now that I'm 54% Tibetan primary culture, I can switch to that as a primary culture for just a few Diplo points. And there goes the decision, you saw that, to form the Tibetan nation. And there we go. Now, interestingly enough, I have a decision, a unique decision, that I can form Sino-Tibetan primary culture, which makes my ruler that culture, whatever, but it will make the Tibetan provinces adopted into the Chinese culture group, which is of course this one over here. And you're going to see that this is a very interesting mechanic, because I will be able to do that with another culture group in a second. There we go. Now this is the Chinese culture group. But before I click all of those missions, I'm going to already switch back to the primary culture of Mongol, because we're going to see in a second why. Okay, so don't wonder why the date has changed, because apparently I missed this one little province that I needed for the Tibetan region for the missions. Anyways, now I can actually click the Tibetan missions, and I'm of course not the Emperor of China, as you can see. And yeah, those missions are pretty easy. You just need to conquer the Tibet region over here that you can see. Don't make the same mistake as I did. Those two provinces are also in there. And there is the mission that I was talking about, Steppe Politics, which will be fulfilled if you have an ally that has lands in the Horde lands and is a steppe nomad, or if you own 10 provinces by yourself. As you can see, I own 126, so that is no problem. So I'm just going to click that now. And you're going to see that I have now actually 3 options available. The first option is just have the steppe nomads be happy basically. And the other 2 basically make me another nation, and they make me a steppe nomad. And those 2 options are not available if you are the Emperor of China. That is why I needed to click this right now. Now, of course, to become the Emperor of China, I now need to fight the current Emperor of China. And apparently, as I'm a new nation, I have to wait for the CB. There we go. Take the Mandate of Heaven. Of course, I'm currently in a devastating financial situation, but it doesn't really matter because I have destated my entire country. But now keep in mind, every event can be held back to click for 3.5 months. So you can just keep it on the side of your screen while declaring for the Mandate of Heaven. And there goes the siege. I could have made it safer by having more infantry, but anyways, this is it. I have 100% on the current Emperor of China, which means that I can now claim the Mandate of Heaven as well as take a province, whatever. And that makes me the current Emperor of China. You can see Tibet. Now, I still have that event pending, okay? So I can still choose those options because as they are available before, they are not going to go away while this event is open on the screen. Which means that I can now, even though I am right now a monarchy with the Celestial Empire reform, I can still decide to become Nomad Horde as one of those 2 nations. And I'm just going to choose the first one. It doesn't really matter, but you can see I am now a steppe nomad again, while still being the Emperor of China, and I can still push for those reforms with those insane modifiers that it gives. Now, of course, this nation is pretty boring to play as, so I'm just going to state Beijing, and I'm going to step up again once. There we go, just click a few options. This one even gives you mandate, which is pretty interesting, so nice. And now, as I am of course back to my primary culture, I did that before, and I am the Emperor of China without being a Celestial Empire, of course, and I have stated Beijing just a second ago, I can now reform the Great Yuan, which gives me one of the most insane national ideas in the entire game. You can see that admin efficiency, core creation costs 25%, manpower and so on. crazy idea set. So this is really worth doing it this way as I did it. And of course, I am still a step nomad. I am right now a step nomad Yuan, Emperor of China, that can even pass a reform already. And maybe you didn't notice a second ago, but the decision to form Yuan is also a culture decision because it changes your Mongol culture into the Chinese culture group, which makes the Chinese culture group right now basically also Tibetan and Mongol culture, and therefore probably the biggest culture in the entire game right now. And this is basically where the video ends for the matter of explaining how it works. But of course, I didn't conquer all of this just for fun. I want to form the Mongol Empire just in the end of this video. Sadly, I have to tell you that one of the things that the Mongol Empire does, it destroys the mandate of heaven, which means I'm just going to save for this right now to have this Yuan established and restore the Mongol Empire. You can see I'm now a unique government type, Great Mongol State, Mongol Empire before 1600, as you can see. So the achievement is also there, as you can see. Khan and Back in Control both enacted, but as I said, sadly the mandate of heaven is destroyed. So if you want to play a horde, you should keep playing as Yuan, of course, but I think this is the perfect ending for this video. So I hope you enjoyed what I explained to you today, and we are going to see, as always, on the next Monday.